In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. So today is Thomas Sunday, and as I almost always do, I'll talk about doubt today, because Thomas is famous, unfortunately, for his doubt. In India, he's actually famous for founding the Church of India. He was sent by the Holy Spirit to India. And it's an interesting story. You know, Thomas, at least by tradition, was an architect and a builder, an engineer, what we'd probably call an engineer today, which is probably why he was also the doubting Thomas. You know, he was sort of the concrete guy. You know, the bridge either holds the weight or it doesn't hold the weight, right? I've got to test it, I got to see it, I got to measure it. That kind of guy, right? And, you know, after he has his experience with Christ and is filled with the Holy Spirit on Pentecost, eventually he makes his way to northern India, and there's actually still buildings, ancient buildings there, or the remains of ancient buildings there that are built in the Greek style, dating from that time, that are attributed to him, that he designed them and oversaw the building of them. So he's he did a lot of great stuff, but unfortunately, he's famous for his moment of doubt. And you know, in my experience, there's a lot of different kinds of doubt. There's a lot of different ways that people doubt. You know, there are people like Thomas who doubt because it's too good to be true. Right? Jesus risen from the dead? Oh, it's too good to be true. Right? That's one kind of doubt. I just can't believe it. It's too good to be true. No, how could that happen? I can't believe it. Right? But there are other kinds of doubt. You know, in my earlier life, I spent 17 years running a writing center at a graduate theology school. So I read a lot of master's and PhD dissertations. 17 years of theses and dissertations. Long enough to see people write PhD level work proving exactly the opposite thing from the same verse. So I've seen it all, right? Basically, people doubt what they want to doubt and believe what they want to believe. That's a lot of time what's going on, right? People can have no trouble believing in, I don't know, Nero or Caligula, the emperors at the time, around the time of Christ, a little after, for which there's actually quite little evidence, right? There's more evidence for the resurrection of Jesus than there is evidence that, I don't know, Plato existed. In terms of concrete, hard evidence, right? People tend to believe what they want to believe and doubt what they want to doubt, in my experience. Now, there are some people who struggle with honest doubt, right? It's kind of like a passion, just like there's some people who struggle with lustful passions, right? Avarice, I can't get enough money. If I just make a little bit more money, I'll be happy. And then you make a little bit more money and it's just not quite enough money, right? Avarice, right? It's a passion. Some people struggle with other sorts of lusts that they just, if they can just get this or do this, then they'll be satisfied. and they're not. Some people struggle with anger. They're just really angry because it's so unfair, because of what somebody did or somebody didn't do, because of what they should have done but they didn't do. And that anger is just always right there. Right? Some people struggle with that. Some people struggle with doubt. Right? How can I know for sure? Got some good news. You don't. That's what faith means. Faith means you don't know for sure. Right? But what faith does is it brings a different kind of knowledge. A different way of knowing. Right? It's like I've seen couples like this. Right? How can I know my wife really loves me? Well, did she tell you she loves you? Yes. What? Well, I know, but what if? It's a passion. It's a lying spirit that just gets stuck in your brain. Right? Doubt does the same thing. It's just this thing that won't go away, that just like a fly buzzing between your ears and won't stop. This is how passions work, right? How did Thomas overcome his doubt? And this is the same way you and I overcome our doubts, overcome any passion that attacks us. So 8 days later, it says, he was with the disciples. The doors were shut for fear of the Jews, and Jesus came with him. Right? And that word 8 days later, it doesn't mean like, we just want to read it as, well, chronological. But that phrase, on the 8th day, is actually an eschatological thing. Right? How many days are in the week? 7, right? So what is this? The 8th day. It's the new day. Right? It's the spiritual day. So it's not only referring to, it was a week plus 1 day later. Well, of course, they counted days differently in those days, right? Like we count, it's got to be 24 hours before it's 1 day. But in those days, they counted, the first day began on day 1, right? So what we call the first day, they would call the second day, right? Because how you count, right? Like a 1-year-old is already 12 months old, instead of calling a baby a 1-year-old because they're in their first year, that sort of thing. You ever go to Korea, you'll have it go crazy because they count that way, especially birthdays. It's hard. Okay, so it's not talking about time, it's talking about the new day. I may spend my whole life wrestling with one passion or another, right? Very old men still come to confession struggling with the lustful passions of 14-year-olds, right? You might have to spend your whole life, but if you spend it with the disciples, if you stay with the brethren, then on the 8th day, Christ will come. And you'll be completely delivered. I love one of the things that St. Isaac the Syrian says. He says, the great thing about death is you can't sin anymore. The great thing about death is you can't sin anymore, right? So we may struggle our whole life with the doubts, or with fears, or with avarice, or lust, or anger, or unforgiveness, or whatever it is. But if we stay with the disciples, on the 8th day, we'll be delivered. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.